Hi, fifth graders. All right, so today for Tuck Everlasting, I am going to be reading chapter 3 to you. Thank you so much for answering the questions that I put out there on a Google form about chapter 2, which were basically asking you just a little bit about what you thought about what century that you thought that the story was taking place. So remember, a century is a 100-year time period. So basically, I was asking you to make an inference, which means that you're making an educated guess based on the information that you heard in chapter 2, maybe a little in chapter 1 also. So most of you were saying that you thought that it was in the 1800s or the 1900s or the early 1900s. And many people were giving the reasoning being that May was riding, she was taking a horse to go visit her sons, and just based on the clothing and the hair that were described also. And those were good guesses. Then I asked you to also give a little description about what you thought May was like and what you thought Tuck was like, and very similar descriptions by people, very interesting ones too. Many people described May as a morning person or very upbeat and excited to see her sons, a positive kind of a person. And then a lot of people described Tuck as kind of being the opposite of that, maybe a little sleepy. Grumpy was a word that I heard a lot of. And those are accurate based on what you know so far. All right. So I am going to be reading chapter 3 today, and you are going to be meeting a new character, a very important one. At noon of that same day in the first week of August, Winnie Foster sat on the bristly grass just inside the fence and said to the large toad that was squatting a few yards away across the road, "I will, though, you'll see. Maybe even first thing tomorrow while everyone's still asleep." It was hard to know whether the toad was listening or not. Certainly Winnie had given it good reason to ignore her. She had come out to the fence very angry, very near the boiling point on a day that was itself near to boiling, and had noticed the toad at once. It was the only living thing in sight, except for a stationary cloud of hysterical gnats suspended in the heat above the road. Winnie had found some pebbles at the base of the fence, and for lack of any other way to show how she felt, had flung one at the toad. It missed altogether, as she'd fully intended it should, but she made a game of it anyway, tossing pebbles at such an angle that they passed through the gnat cloud on their way toward the toad. The gnats were too frantic to notice these intrusions, however, and since every pebble missed its final mark, the toad continued to squat and grimace without so much as a twitch. Possibly it felt resentful, or perhaps it was only asleep. In either case, the toad gave her not a glance when at last Winnie ran out of pebbles and sat down to tell it her troubles. "Look here, Toad," she said, thrusting her arms through the bars of the fence and plucking at the weeds on the other side. "I don't think I can stand it much longer." At this very moment, a window at the front of the cottage flung open, and a thin voice, her grandmother's, piped, "Winifred, don't sit on that dirty grass. You'll stain your boots and stockings." And another firmer voice, her mother's, added, "Come in now, Winnie, right away. You'll get heat stroke out there on a day like this, and your lunch is ready." "See," said Winnie to the toad, "that's just what I mean. It's like that every minute. If I had a sister or a brother, there'd be someone else for them to watch. But as it is, there's only me. I'm tired of being looked at all the time. I want to be by myself for a change." She leaned her forehead against the bars and after a short silence went on in a thoughtful tone. I'm not exactly sure what I do, but something interesting. Something that's all mine. Something that would make some kind of difference in the world. It'd be nice to have a new name to start with, one that's not all worn out from being called so much. And I might even decide to have a pet. Maybe a big old toad like you, that I could keep in a nice cage with lots of grass and... But at this thought, the toad stirred and blinked. It gave a heave of muscles and plopped its heavy mud ball of a body a few inches farther away from her. I suppose you're right, said Winnie. Well, then you'd be just the way I am now. Why should you have to be cooped up in a cage too? It'd be better if I could be like you, out in the open, making up my own mind. Do you know, they've hardly ever let me out of this yard all by myself. I'll never be able to do anything important if I stay in here like this. I expect I'd better run away. She paused and peered anxiously at the toad to see how it would receive this staggering idea. But the toad showed no signs of interest. You think I wouldn't dare, don't you? She said accusingly. I will, though. You'll see. Maybe even first thing in the morning while everyone's still asleep. Winnie, came the firm voice from the window. All right, I'm coming, she cried, exasperated, but then quickly added, I mean, I'll be right there, Mama. She stood up, brushing at her legs where bits of itchy grass clung to her stockings. The toad, as if it saw that their interview was over, stirred again, bunched up, and bounced itself clumsily off toward the woods. Winnie watched it go. Hop away, little toad, she called after it. But you'll see. Just wait till morning. So, in chapter 3, you got to meet Winnie Foster. Winnie Foster is the only child in the house living in the Foster Touch-Me-Not cottage, which is inside of the bars, where they have bars around their property and across the road from the woods. And so Winnie was outside and decided to have a conversation with a toad. And you got a lot of information about Winnie just based on the dialogue that she had with the toad. I have one question for you. Why do you think that Winnie is pondering the thought of running away? Based on the information that you were given, what do you think your best answer would be to that? All right. That is it for chapter 3, and I will be back with more tomorrow. Thanks for listening.